Good morning, and thank you for joining us here at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. We appreciate all of their help in planning this program. My name is Louis Amador, and I am the CDC Program Coordinator at the Tourette Association of America. TAA is proud to have a partnership with the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, through which we work to provide education programs to professionals and families and develop resources that address medical and educational needs. We have held programs like this in all 50 states. Today's presenter is going to be Amanda Coffman, and Amanda is a member of the Tourette Association Education Advisory Board. Her experience includes a variety of settings, from partial hospital programs to both private and public schools. She earned her BS in Education from Boston University and her MED in Gifted and Talented from the University of Connecticut. As a teacher and parent of 2 children with Tourette syndrome, she speaks and writes about TS frequently and its effects on the classroom and the home. So without further ado, Amanda Coffman.
Good morning. So as Louis said, I'm going to be talking about working with your school team to benefit your child. And I want to highlight a couple of those words before we start. Number 1, working with your school team. You are a member of the school team. So it is important that when you're working with members of the school, whether it's just sending an email to the teacher or if you're coming into a full IEP meeting, that you're coming in with the attitude that you are a member of that team, with important things to contribute, and to the benefit of your child. That's what we're focusing on, is benefiting your child. So this is often what it looks like when you come into a school team meeting. There's a very long table and people already sitting around it. Generally, you're the last one to walk in the room. And what I seem to find is that it is the biggest possible table they could get to fit within the size of the room. So it seems like there's that intimidation factor already. And the truth is there is a power imbalance. That's a reality. There's not designed to be a power imbalance. You're supposed to be an equal member of that team. But when you come into a room filled with 10 people already, that makes you 1/11 of that team. So there is a power imbalance. And so making sure that you're bringing the right attitude with you to equalize that imbalance is very important. I'm going to show you a video clip that may resonate with some of you as far as, the experiences you've had coming into team meetings. Where's the sound? Okay, well, let me tell you about it. So the parent is over here on this side, and she is being introduced to the team, which includes everybody from the classroom teacher to the music teacher to the janitor. And it does sometimes feel that way, like they have pulled together everybody in the room to show the amount of power that the school is bringing to this side. And now the woman in the middle is the team leader, which is often the principal, director of special ed, somebody with a title. And she has just asked, have you ever been to a team meeting before? And the parent has answered no. And so they give each other high fives as they go around the table. Then she describes the process. The process being, we're gonna spend about 5 minutes buttering you up. We're gonna tell you everything that's wrong with your child. You'll cry, and then we'll all go to lunch. Does that sound good? And so mom's taking notes, yes. You're gonna tell me everything that's wrong with my child, and then we're all gonna go to lunch. That sounds good. And that is definitely the way it feels. The other part of this clip that I really like is she's sitting there, the woman next to mom is her sister. She says, I brought my sister today because she didn't have anything else to do and wanted to get out of the house. My husband apologizes that he couldn't be here, but I wouldn't let him come. And my husband understands that because he rarely interfaces with the school unless I need him to send an email that includes his professional signature. So this is a clip from the Rights Law website. Rights Law is a fantastic website for getting understanding about educational law and educational precedent. And I can say that generally I find them very helpful. However, the quote here is, quality special education services are intensive, individualized, and expensive. Because parents want quality services for their children, parent-school conflict is normal, predictable, and inevitable. I could not disagree with this more. Number one, there's nothing that says that the special education services for a child with Tourette syndrome need to be particularly expensive. A lot of the things that we're asking for are simple modifications within the classroom that don't have to cost a dime. Number two, it's this attitude that brings about conflict between the parent and the school. It is not that conflict is normal, predictable, or inevitable. It is coming in thinking that you are sitting on the opposite side of this table asking for something that they don't want to give you, which brings together this conflict. Your best bet to benefit your child is to build quality relationships with the people in the school. So the first time you go into school to talk about your kid, whether you've called the meeting or you've been called into the meeting, the people that are in there are the people in the district and in the entire system who you have the best chance of getting on your side. You have your child's teacher who sees them every single day. If they are identified for special education, you have their special education teacher. You have any therapist that the school provides. You have the people who work with your child every single day. In addition, sometimes you have the principal who not only knows who your child is, but knows that the other adults in the room are people he needs to keep happy. So that's the best chance you have, the best team you have to truly find the right solutions to benefit your child. Once you've gone outside that team, you've gone outside of the people who care about your child for who your child is. So I'm not saying never go above the team. I'm not saying never contact the director of special education. Sometimes you need to do that. I'm saying don't threaten it lightly. If you need to go outside of that team, it's because that team needs more resources than they can bring to bear. If you've come into conflict with that team, then you need to work on finding a solution within that team with the people who know your kid and spend time with your kid. And here's where the idea of special education is expensive and we're going to limit the resources comes into play. People often don't have a good idea of what they're entitled to. So what you are entitled to, what every child in this country is entitled to, is a free, appropriate public education, which means they can't make you pay for it, except in Kansas, where they can apparently make you pay all kinds of school fees and you have to rent your textbooks, and there's a certain amount you have to pay for your free, appropriate public education. The second word is appropriate. The courts have ruled very conservatively on what is an appropriate education. An appropriate education is one that provides some benefit to your child. So I once had a director of special education that I worked for describe it to me like this: you're entitled to a 1985 Chevy, not a brand new Ferrari. So just because you think that something would help your child to maximize their potential, legally, the school is not responsible for maximizing your child's potential. They're responsible for providing them an education that offers them some benefit. As an example, the Supreme Court case that has established what free appropriate public education is in this country was Rowley versus the Board of Education. In that case, Amy Rowley was a child with a hearing loss. Her parents were asking for her to have a sign language interpreter. Sounds like a very normal request for a student with a hearing loss. The school said she didn't require it because she was still making good grades. So the fact that she had very limited ability to communicate with her classmates or to receive communication from her classmates or teacher did not interfere with her ability to receive an appropriate education because she was still making good grades. So you're not going to be able to use the law as the great stick that you can beat the team with to get out what you want. If you want an upgrade from your 1985 Chevy, you're going to have to do that through the relationships you build with the school. You're going to have to make the people in that room want to provide greater services for your child. So how do you do that? Well, this meeting that you're going to walk into, again, whether you've called it because you want to explain Tourette to the team or you've been called in for some reason, is very important. But we have to keep this in perspective. This is most likely you in preparation for this meeting. You have everything you've ever read about Tourette syndrome. You have your child's complete medical record. You have, the coffee you've been drinking to keep yourself awake and alert to be able to handle this stressful situation. You've got yourself all prepared. This is the school team at your meeting. And this is what you want. You have done nothing but talk about this school meeting since it was scheduled up until the moment you walk into it. Everybody knows in your family, in your friend group, at work, that you're going to meet with the school. This meeting is not the most important thing on the schedule that day for the members of that team, and that's how you want it. You never want your child to be the teacher's biggest concern. If the meeting with you is the meeting the teacher has been talking about at home to her spouse all week long, then you're probably further behind than you had hoped. There's a bigger crisis than you're aware of. Now, when I talk to teachers, I tell them that they cannot dare look like this in a meeting. That this is so important to you that they need to act like it is important to them. But in reality, this is sort of the attitude you want. You want this to feel routine for the other people that are there because there's that power imbalance. This is uncomfortable for you. It is not uncomfortable for them, and you want them to feel very comfortable in the routine of what they're doing. So let's talk about what you should bring and how you should act in this meeting. Number one, you want to bring something to take notes because it is a stressful situation and you're not going to remember everything that was said. So you want to be able to write things down. Or, if you haven't let your husband come with you, you might want to have to interpret this for him later. So you want to write things down. Do not bring a tape recorder. This is one of those sort of, hidden social mores that nobody tells you about. As soon as you ask to record the session, this has now become a legal issue with the school. They're going to say yes, and then they're going to pull out their own recording so that if you ever end up in court, they can prove you haven't doctored the recording of what was said. So you have immediately taken this into that adversarial realm. Remember, that adversarial realm is not inevitable. But maybe without knowing it, you've pulled in something where the school team is now interpreting this as the parents think they're going to end up in court, and so they're recording it. So I was saying this one time, and I had somebody say to me, but I have an auditory processing disorder, and I record things all the time because I don't catch it all the first time around. So can I not bring my tape recorder? And my response was, if you need a tape recorder to provide you with an ADA accommodation for your own challenges in this meeting, absolutely bring it. But bring it up when you're invited to the meeting. When whoever calls you to say, can you come in on Tuesday at this time? Say, absolutely, I'm available on Tuesday afternoon. Just so you know, I have an auditory processing problem and I often record things. Is that going to be a problem if I bring a tape recorder? They're still going to bring their own tape recorder, but they're going to interpret the use of your tape recorder much differently. You should bring a short list of things you want to address. Whether you've called the meeting or you've been called into the meeting, you have things you want to talk to the school about as well. And you should have that list with you so that you can refer to it and you can make sure that all of your concerns are heard along with all of their concerns. But it should be a short list. Remember, again, this is not the only thing everybody else in that room has to do today. And by the time they start addressing concern number 47 of yours, they no longer care about addressing it well. They care about getting it done. So truly think about your child and what their biggest barriers are at school and focus on that. If your child doesn't tick at school, the team does not need to know every tick your child currently has. And I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from parents. The teachers say he doesn't even tick at school. I hear that from my kids' teachers. I had no idea he had tics. I never see them. My response is always, I know. It doesn't mean I need to give you a full written list of tics, nor do I need to prove to you that my child really does tick. No, I need to talk about how Tourette impacts his day in school. And a lot of times that's more his anxiety than his tics. So let's talk about the fact that he hasn't used the bathroom in school all year long because there are other people in the bathroom at the same time and he can't. That's on my short list. Telling you about all the other things he can't do because of his anxiety does not pertain to this meeting. I advocate bringing your child, and this is my child, and this is actually an old picture of my child, because I advocate bringing your child much younger than most people do. If your child is in middle school or high school, bring your child to the meeting. There should be nothing said about your child over the age of 11 or 12 that you don't want said in front of your child. Does your child know he struggles in school? Yes. Does your child know he has behaviors that are inappropriate? Yes. But the only person that's going to fix those things is your kid. It also does change the tone of the meeting to be much more positive when we have the child sitting in the room. The way that we word things becomes very different. Things are now a struggle or a challenge instead of a problem. So it's important that your child be there. They don't necessarily have to be there for the entire meeting. This is a picture of Galen in second grade. And when we went in second grade to talk about Tourette with the principal, Galen came with us because he was the one that could say where in this new school building he was coming into were going to be the biggest challenges for him. So it was important that he be there. Now, when I felt later that I needed to have a conversation with the principal about the right teacher, I did not bring him because he didn't need to be part of that conversation. But if you're having a conversation about your child needs to be there. If your child isn't there physically, I often recommend bringing a picture because you want to remind the school team who you're here talking about. Do not, however, bring a full presentation with you about either Tourette or your child. And the reason for that is we will make fun of you later. I have had parents do this before. I had a parent write a resume for her 6th grader. I had a parent prepare a PowerPoint presentation about the merits of her child and the things we needed to take into consideration. And I once had a parent bring an entire box of artifacts, including his swimming trophies and pictures that she'd obviously taken off the refrigerator that he'd drawn when he was 4, to show us all of her child's varied talents. It's important that we stay focused on your child's strengths, but to prepare something like that distracts us later. I can tell you all I could think about was preparing a mock resume for my child, who was 18 months at the time, to share with the rest of the team after seeing a resume for an 11-year-old. It's good to bring along some very helpful literature. And the Tourette Association has some great things on their website, some really good targeted articles for your issue. I often use the one on handwriting because that is a big issue for my son. So here's a short article about how Tourette affects handwriting that I would like to share with you. Do not bring every book off your bookshelf or every article you've ever found helpful in your entire life, because they're going to be ignored. If you hand the team an article that is less than 4 pages long, I can guarantee to you just about every member of that team is going to read it. If you bring them a reading list of things they should read, they're not going to follow up on any of it. This is not the time to share information with everybody else to make everyone's experience with Tourette better. Now, I have given targeted books to the libraries at the school to make sure that they're available. I have given books on Tourette to teachers as Christmas gifts or end of the year gifts, but it's not when I bring them up at the team meeting. At the team meeting, it's what we're focused on, and it's something short, some information I actually want them to have. Bring someone with you. Even if you're not going to let your spouse come, and I don't care if it is your sister just because she needed to get out of the house, bring somebody with you. This is a stressful time. You're not going to remember everything, and you're not going to remember it correctly. You're not going to remember how it was said. You're not going to remember the details of it. You're going to be thinking about your biggest concern and miss their biggest concern. Bring someone with you, but not someone adversarial. You don't want the person you've brought with you to take over the process. The other thing I will say is introduce the person that you bring and say why they're there. This is my sister. She's here to take notes for me so that I can concentrate on our conversation. This is my neighbor. She's been through this process with her son, who has very similar diagnoses. I asked her to sit in to make sure I'm not missing anything important. I had an IEP once where mom came in with someone the team did not recognize, and we'd worked with this family in the past. So we went around the table to do our introductions, and he introduced himself, and he said, "I'm Bob." Did not indicate in any reason what his role there was. I will tell you, the number one conversation we had about that IEP meeting after it was over was, who was Bob? Why was he here? Is it mom's new boyfriend? Like, what was his role here? Instead of focusing on the kid, we were now focusing on this stranger who just wasn't properly introduced. What do I say? I think you should always start with, today I would like to, whether you've called the meeting or you've been called into the meeting, particularly if you've been called into the meeting. This is one of your opportunities to level this unequal playing field. They've got an agenda for what they want to cover. You need to put that out there. Today, I would like to talk about the ways I see Galen's anxiety interfering with his ability to be available to learn. Now they know exactly what your issue is, and your issue is now up front on the agenda. Today, I would like to talk about my concern that my son's behaviors are things he's being held accountable for when they're not within his control. Now I've set a big concern which may directly change the school's agenda, but I've not said it in an adversarial way. I've not said I've come in here because you're all wrong about what's going on. This is just what I want to address today. You're going to tell me what you want to address. Here's what I want to address. My biggest concern for Jacob is, this is a good one to use when you feel like things are getting off track. When you feel like, we're nitpicking things like, where's he going to sit on the bus? And we're not getting down to the big areas. Okay, I understand what you're talking about, but my biggest concern for Jacob is that his behaviors are being misinterpreted. I see your concern. How can we work around that? This is a really important one, and it needs to start with, I see your concern. It needs to start with you're saying something valid to me, but that's not the end of the conversation. How do we work around that? This comes up a lot of times. Sometimes you will ask for something that a teacher does not feel comfortable with in her classroom. And here's what I'm going to tell you. You can ask for it. You can get it written down. You can get everybody to sign off on it. If the teacher is not comfortable with it happening in her classroom, it's not going to happen. So let's say you've said, my child needs to be able to walk freely around the classroom and not be asked to sit in his seat. And the teacher says, that's going to be really distracting for me and for the other students to just have your kid up wandering around. This is not a teacher who is all that comfortable with free movement in her classroom. You can get it written in to an IEP, to a 504. You can stand up and say that it is important, it is something kids with Tourette need, they need to be able to move. But it is not going to happen in that classroom if the teacher is not comfortable with it. So you need to say, I see your concern. How can we work around that? And then stop and wait and listen. See if she'll put something out there that she would be comfortable with. Or if you need to put something out there that maybe she can be more comfortable with. What if we give him an area in which he can walk? What if he can walk between his desk and the bookshelf so that he's not walking in front of anybody else? Would that make you comfortable? How can we put this across to him so that he can get the movement that he needs? Does he need to walk, or can we just let him stand? Is it okay with you if he stands during instruction? Can we decide where to place his desk so that his standing and fidgeting during instruction won't be a distraction? I see your concern, but how do we work around that? This is my favorite one, and it makes people angry. It especially makes people angry if you use it and you are a member of the school team. And that is that a written policy? In almost all cases, that is not a written policy. So you may be told things like, I do not change students' teacher placement once those decisions have been made. Is that a written policy? No, it's not a written policy. It's just the way that I run things as the principal of that school. Well, I understand why you would need to do that, but we're here talking about my child because of an unusual situation. So I see your concern that everybody would want their placements changed. How do we get around that in this instance? If you're told it is a written policy, ask for a copy. That's the second point in which you'll find out it's not actually a written policy. I appreciate your perspective. You are walking into somebody's workspace. So you're walking into a big part of their lives. Just like you need to feel heard, they need to feel heard. We all know how you feel when grandma comes over and tells you you're parenting your child wrong in your own home. Whereas, wouldn't it be helpful if she said, I see your perspective on this, but I think it's more beneficial when we... One of the hard things about Tourette is you're trying to put out there your perspective now. I see your perspective on needing to maintain behavioral control in the classroom. One of the hard things about Tourette is a lot of these behaviors are not within his control. So you're giving it that spin of not just my kid, but my kid's issues. And let me talk about the problem that is now not located within my child, but is located within this thing called Tourette. Because we can talk about that easier than we can talk about my child. Is it possible that, or is it possible to? So you're now putting out a suggestion about how you want the teacher to run her classroom, or how you want the principal to run his building, but you're putting it out there as a suggestion. Is it possible that Susie could chew gum in class because it does help her focus? I hear what you're saying, but I see it differently. This is the best thing to say when you're really coming into conflict, because you need to be able to set up what the conflict is. I hear what you're saying about holding him accountable, but I see it differently. I don't think this is about accountability. So now you're talking about the root cause of the behaviors or whatever's going on, rather than just the punishments that are coming out from it. we tried, the we is really important because you're a team member, right? Have we tried, which means basically, are you willing to try to do this? And then how can I best support this at home? So you're showing there that, you may be coming in with a lot of knowledge and a lot of ideas about what you want them to do for your child, but you're recognizing that your role is to support this at home. You may have asked for your child to be able to move freely about the classroom, to leave the classroom to go get a drink whenever he feels like he needs it, to not have to do the other homework that the other kids in the class are doing, to not be asked to be silent. During times he simply cannot be silent. You've asked for a lot of things that are going on in a place you're not going to be. So it's really important for you to back up and say, how do I best support this at home? Or how would you like me to explain this to my child? In your professional opinion will get you so far with the school team. I can count on one hand the number of times a parent has ever referred to me as a professional in 18 years of education. Generally, there is the feeling politically and in the greater world that you know about education because you have an education. So simply asking in your professional opinion will get you really far along the way. Thank you. Thank you is important. You don't have to bring me great gifts to make me care about your kid, though a Milky Way and a vanilla Coke is never going to hurt your child standing in my classroom. But a simple thank you or I appreciate and something specific. Even if it's, I appreciate the time you put into this conversation today, even if you've agreed on nothing. I appreciate the thought that you put into the requests that I made. As you're wrapping up the meeting, here are some things you need to say. What is the next step? I feel like we often leave meetings without having parents have any idea what is the next step. What is the next step? Well, we agreed on these things today and we're going to implement them. When should we plan to revisit this? So we're going to allow for the movement that you've asked, and we're going to allow him to bring in gum, and it's okay if he has a fidget toy in his desk, and we're going to try these things and see if he's able to concentrate more. That's great. When should we plan to revisit this? Let's set up another meeting in a month or 6 weeks or 2 months. Let's not leave it open-ended to say, oh, we tried this, it isn't working. When should we plan to revisit this? When can I expect to hear? If anything has been left open-ended, if you came in to talk about placement for next year and the answer that you get is, we haven't made class assignments, then you need to ask, when should I expect to hear about his class assignment? That way you're not losing sleep over these things either. You know when something's coming down the pike and you can follow up on it. Who should I contact about? So it may come up that you've asked for something that the team does not feel was within their realm to offer you, okay? Let's say my child's handwriting is atrocious. I would really like him to have a laptop to be able to use to type assignments. And the response you get is, we don't have any in the building available. Okay, who should I contact about that? Because the answer is not just, okay, well then no, that's not gonna happen. You don't have any available. Who should I contact about getting this? A really important thing is to work in the now. And there are 2 ways that parents go off track on working in the now. One of my favorite things that I have to say to myself over and over again as a parent is, I'm not gonna borrow problems from tomorrow, I have enough already today. And there are lots of ways that we borrow problems from tomorrow. Number 1, we get caught up in the big picture of Tourette syndrome and not the small picture of our child. So what I did is I took one of my favorite publications from the Tourette website is the Red Flags. That's the title of it, Red Flags with Tourette Syndrome, which is basically how do you know things are going wrong at school. And I just copied the text and put it into a Wordle to show us what words show up most, okay? And obviously, the thing you're supposed to be most concerned about with Tourette and school is behaviors, or things that are inappropriate, or assignments, or tasks, or directions. But maybe these big ideas aren't what you're most concerned about now. Maybe you're most concerned about avoidance, or anxiety, or peers. Because those are the biggest issues in the now. It's possible that your child may have difficulty completing assignments in the future. But if they're not having difficulty completing assignments now, let's not waste time talking about it. The second way in which we lose sight of talking about the now is we talk too far into the future. So this was an email response I received from the teacher when my son was in 3rd grade about, my question was why they were departmentalizing. Why did he have to change teachers for science and social studies when it was hard enough to find one desk in one space where he felt comfortable? And Galen's big concern at the time was not that he had to go to a different room or that he had to listen to a different adult. His biggest concern was that while he was in this other room, somebody was in his desk and they were touching his pencil. He was sure of it. So when I got the response back, which I laugh about because I actually work in the school now where he attends, and his 3rd grade teacher is one of my best friends. But this was the response, and the biggest thing that stood out was middle school. Why were they changing classes in 3rd grade? Because they needed to be prepared for middle school. Do not fall into this trap of letting other people tell you that he's not always going to be able to do this way, or that's going to cause a problem later. If it's not later, it's not a problem. So, we didn't get into the school needs to change their entire system. We went back to what was the big problem. The big problem was not changing classes. It was not behavior. It was not school. The big problem was anxiety, and it was his pencil. And so he took his pencil with him. That was the solution. He left nothing on his desk, and his teacher assured him that nobody sat in his desk when he wasn't there. Now, wasn't true. She needed every desk in the room. She just told him nobody sat at his desk when he wasn't there, and he took his pencil, and the problem was solved. We didn't have to get into major conversations about things that weren't an issue, and we didn't have to talk about middle school and 3rd grade. I go back and forth myself with the idea of normalization and whether this is something that we should be talking about, whether we should just be expanding the concept of what is normal rather than trying to find out things that are not normal. But I will tell you, parenting 2 kids with Tourette, some of the things they do, no matter how far I expand my concept of normal, are not going to fit. So I am not going to make my child normal. I am not going to make them fit any conception of normal. When you are working with the school team, your job is to help normalize their school experience. Okay? So maybe they need something that sits on their desk that they can tap on. And I have had parents say to me, but the other kids don't have that, and they're going to ask about it, and it's not normal. It's not normal to get up in the middle of a lesson and just leave the room without asking permission. They're going to stand out if I ask them to do this. And the truth is, your child stands out. If you're having a conversation with the school about any kind of accommodation, trust me, your kid already stands out. Your job is to normalize their school experience. Your job is to give them their best opportunity to be available for learning when learning is presented so that they can excel. Your job is to give them ways to control their anxiety or control their tics or control whatever symptoms are interfering with learning so that they can learn in school. Your job is to normalize their school experience. they'll find their tribe of other non-normal people to be their friends. This is a hard one. You need to practice saying difficult things, and you need to practice it until you can say them without crying. You don't get to cry at school. And that's hard, because I will tell you, I cry about Tourette. I do. And there have been some hard messages I had to deliver about my kids, and I wanted to cry. But once you cry, you've derailed the entire process. Number one, you are in a room full of people who have chosen a helping profession. So what do they want to do when you cry? They want to comfort you. But as soon as they are comforting you, they're not focusing on your child. They're thinking about how what you just told them made you feel and not what it means for your child's education. Secondly, how often does even your spouse respond positively when you just burst into tears? It's generally not a positive experience for most people. So we need to practice saying difficult things until we can say them without crying. But you need to say them. Don't try to hide this difficult information about your child. Okay? Gillham was on a medication one time where he had visual hallucinations. That was information the school needed to know. It was not easy to say without crying, so I had to practice it over and over and over again until I could, until I felt like I was talking about somebody else's child than my own. But sometimes that distance from your child, while you're there and you're your kid's best advocate, if you need to develop that distance from your child to be their best advocate, you need to do that. Make sure that you are working as part of the team. We've talked about how you establish yourself in this team, but make sure that you're not the one creating the adversarial relationship. Number one mistake parents make that take them off the team is thinking that their child is an angel. Your child is not an angel. They are not perfect. Not everything that they do is related to their Tourette syndrome. Sometimes they do need to receive consequences for things. Sometimes they do need to receive discipline. This is the hardest thing next to not crying, is you don't get to go into your mama bear mode for your child. You don't get to interpret this attack on your child as something that you are going to go in there and take care of. You are going to put people in their place. You are going to deal with this. Because as much satisfaction as you might get from doing that, from being right and showing them how they're wrong and winning this, you get to walk out of that school building feeling really good. And who is still in class? Your kid. And your kid is just as weird as they were before you went in and took care of this. And they have the same issues they did before you went in and took care of this. But particularly if you are talking about the teacher in the room, you have now sent an angry person back to your kid. And that's not fair to your child. So you don't get to do that. There is one exception. If the individual is not in direct contact with your child, so if it is a counselor, if it is a therapist, if it is somebody that doesn't currently have direct contact with your child, and they've already announced the retirement, and there's less than 2 weeks of school left, feel free to say anything you want to say. Here are some other things not to say. I think, I feel, I want. It is not about you. So number one, don't couch things in I think. I think it would be better if nobody cares what you think. It's not about you. Just take off the I think. It would be better if we would consider this. I feel. Again, it's not about your feelings. Or I want. It's not about what you want. It's about what your child needs to be able to access their free, appropriate public education. I've spoken to plenty of other parents, and they all say, no, I'm not saying don't talk to plenty of other parents. Talk to plenty of other parents. Understand the relationships in that room as much as you can before you walk in, okay? Get those opinions. But I'm sorry you can't bring it up because I can't address it. I don't care what the school has done for somebody else you know. I don't care if you know it happens because the kid who sits next to your child gets it. I can't talk to you about it. And that right there sets up that adversarial issue because we can't have an open conversation about it. We cannot have a conversation about why I'm saying no to this for your child when you know somebody else gets it. Because I can't tell you that their diagnoses are much more severe than your child's. I can't tell you that they read 3 grade levels below your child. I can't tell you why they get it and you don't. So let's not bring it up. Let's just talk about your child and what your child needs. The other thing that I didn't put on here that goes along with this is don't say all kids with Tourette. There is no all kids with Tourette. Don't say, not my kid, because you're gonna back yourself into a corner where it was your kid. Okay? So even if they're describing a situation that you find hard to believe your child was involved with, you need to listen as if your child was, and problem solve as if it actually occurred. You people don't know anything about Tourette. This is a dangerous one for a couple of reasons. Number one, I could be in the room on the other side of that table from you. You don't know what the people in the room know about Tourette. That's why you want to couch it with the difficult thing about Tourette is, and get the focus back on the disorder, where maybe you can educate a group of people who is completely uneducated in this situation. But you can't assume that everybody is uneducated in this situation. I also tell the same thing to teachers and administrators, not to assume that they're the experts in the room, because they could also be in a room with me on the parent side of the table, knowing what my rights are. Speaking of that, in just general tone, don't ever say things like, I've had it with you people. This is what's wrong with public schools. This, by the way, is not what's wrong with public schools. It's a lot of other things. So just putting it on, special education or accommodations for a single child is not covering it. Never say I know my rights, because you probably don't. And they have a lawyer on speed dial that they can immediately call and find out if they're right. So that's not someplace that I would go. My taxes pay your salary, also not a good one. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. That means that the train has already left the tracks, and there's no getting it back after that. So you've had this meeting, you've said all the right things, you've said none of the wrong things, and you feel like you really have reached some good solutions for your child. The most important thing is you feel like you've built some relationships in that room so that even when you're not in the room, people want to do the right thing for your child. So what happens now? Well, what happens now is you will be the first to walk out the door, and the rest of us are going to stay and talk about you. And I guarantee to you this is going to happen even if it doesn't appear that it's happening, okay? Even if I walk, we all get up and leave the room together. Even if I walk you out the office to make sure you sign out okay, we are still getting back together to talk about you afterwards. I have never, ever had a meeting with a parent where there was not a post-meeting afterwards somewhere. And I will tell you, I guard against this very carefully in my own life. When I hold IEPs in my building, the IEP is generally in the conference room. I make sure to walk the parent out, to the main area where they're signing out. And then I purposefully will say goodbye to them and head down the hallway towards my classroom so that it looks like I am also gone. I will tell you at some point before I leave for that day, I have had a conversation with the principal and with the classroom teacher about that meeting. Every single time. So we are going to talk about you afterwards. So your behavior in the meeting is so, so important. Because you cannot let them leave that meeting, come back together, and be able to use the word crazy. Even if you feel like this whole situation is driving you crazy, you cannot let them call you crazy. I love this meme that I found. It says, IEP meeting tomorrow. I have a flask, a shiv, voodoo dolls, poison blow darts, truth serum, and a vial of holy water. Am I missing anything? I'm pretty sure I've had an IEP meeting with this mom, by the way. So here's the problem with crazy. And it will come about if you cry, if you talk about your needs and your wants, if you give information that pertains to your family but doesn't pertain to your child, if you seem completely unreasonable in any way, if you say things like, you'll be hearing from my lawyer, that is where you open up the door to crazy. Here's the problem with crazy. Your child lives in this school. They are in the classroom you've just sent the teacher that you've angered back to. And that teacher is the number one person who's going to make a decision about what teacher they have next year. And let's say you've intervened for your kid and you requested a teacher and you got the teacher you requested. The first time the new teacher has a question about your kid, where do you think she's going to go? She's going to go to last year's teacher. And it is perfectly fine if last year's teacher has strong words about you. It's perfectly fine if that teacher says, these parents are demanding. These parents are very knowledgeable. These parents will take up a lot of your time. Because generally that comes across as, these parents are very demanding, but they want what's right for their kid. So sometimes it's just easier to do what they're asking, or at least try it out. If what they say is, forget it, these parents are crazy, don't even waste your time, you're not going to make them happy. You can't come off with the idea that you're crazy, that you're overbearing, that you're not focused on your child. You can't get into that power struggle. You can't create that adversarial relationship because you can't pull yourself back out of it. And that power imbalance still exists. So here are the 3 things that I want you to take away from this, the most important things to remember. Number 1, it's about relationships. It is not about paperwork. It is about making the people in the room care as much about your child as you do, and making them want to find success for your child like you do. And that's not a difficult task most of the time. Teachers and administrators want their kids to be successful. They want to run a school where kids are happy to be, where things work out. So you build those relationships, and then you have a whole team working for your child. Number 2, keep first things first. There are a million things to worry about, and there are a million adjustments you have to make. And tomorrow, there'll be different ones. So you have to think about, what is the biggest issue here? I do not need to educate this teacher about recognizing Tourette syndrome in future students. I need to educate this teacher about how my child's Tourette syndrome is manifesting in this classroom. And the last thing is, it's about your kid. It's about making Galen's experience of school a place that he wants to be, where he has the skills that he needs to be available for learning to maximize his potential. So make sure when you walk into the big conference room with the big table, that you sit down with the confidence that you have the skills to be an equal member of this team. Thank you.